This is a Dreamcast disc and is for use only on a Dreamcast unit. Playing this disc on a hi-fi or other audio equipment can cause serious damage to its speakers.
Dreamcast, up to 6 billion players.
Welcome back to the stage of history.
Why don't we play together?
Hey, it's time to make some crazy money. Are you ready? Here we go!
Please stop this disc now.
Hello and welcome to the Dreamcast Junkyard DreamPod episode 81, Heaven and Hell, Part 2, which will no doubt be a rage-inducing hour and a half of hot takes, arguing, and people talking over each other, which is just how we like it. First things first, introductions. My name is Tom, and I will be acting as devil's advocate on this episode. And joining me here in Purgatory, we have Andrew Dickinson. Hello, Andrew.
Hello. We
have Mike Phelan. Hello, Mike.
Evening.
We've got Kev Mason. Hello, Kev.
Beep. Someone needs to change my batteries. Dreamcast humour.
And as always, bringing up the rear, James Harvey. Hello.
I can't believe you put me last on purpose this time.
It's a running gag. We've got to go with it.
Honestly.
Right, gents, a couple of things on the agenda before we delve into the main hellish or heavenly discussion. Now, Andrew, I know you don't really like to talk about this, but you wrote a book once called Dreamcast Year 1, and it was quite good, apparently, especially the bits with me in. But Dreamcast Year 2 is now live on Kickstarter, and would you like to tell our listeners why they should back it? What is it? Come on, give us it. Give us the pitch. Elevator pitch.
The pitch. It's a bit I'm really bad at. It's got you in it, Tom. Again, you'll be in
it
again. So there you go. As will I think everybody who's on this pod right now, as well as some people who aren't. So yeah, Dreamcast Junkyard are a big part of Dreamcast Year 2. So anybody who's listening to DreamPod and, if you like the Dreamcast Junkyard, then that's a good enough reason for you to back it, really. If you listen to this and you don't like the Dreamcast Junkyard, then why are you listening? What's going on? But yeah, no, it's kind of I keep describing it as the same as Year 1 except the next year. So it's exactly the same as the first book. So you'll get the story, you'll get the interviews, you'll get the retrospectives, just more of everything. So there's going to be a double the amount of retrospectives this time, and lots of the guys from the Dreamcast Junkyard will be pitching in to write those. We've also got articles this time, so we'll have a few articles, but one from Sandeep Rai, who wrote PlayStation Vita Year 1 and Year 2 and 3 and all the PlayStation Vita books, basically. He'll be writing one about 2D fighters, interviews with Corey Marshall, with Ian Lee, with John Linneman, loads of different people. Yeah, there's just a lot going on, and there's more than just the book. There's a zine, the DCJY zine. There's the ability to get a 100-word retrospective in the book if you want to. Just all sorts of really cool stuff. So definitely worth a look, I think.
Yeah,
but totally. I would say that because I wrote it. So.
Well, yeah, I mean, and I think most of us here are backers as well as contributors. So I'm looking forward to seeing how the book turns out. We mustn't forget to mention as well, of course, the awesome artwork from Dan Tiller at My Name Is Dan on Twitter. He's a really talented guy, and he does some really good stuff with the PlayStation retro style cover art that he gives away on Twitter. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, he did one for Shenmue 3 as well, but in the PAL Dreamcast style, which I have. I think I've got one of those, so that was really cool. But yeah, he does some fantastic work. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what else he can do. Like if you look at the campaign page, it's only a small image, but the Metropolis Street Racer retrospective, which you will be writing, Tom.
Indeed, yes.
Yeah, he's done a great piece of art for that. With what's the name of the car that's on the cover again? It's the Vauxhall something or other.
Vauxhall
VX220.
That's the one. Yeah,
that's the one. So that's the kind of iconic to that game, really. So that will be there's a great piece that he's done for that. So amazing artwork. And that's kind of it's half the it's half the book really. There's half of the book which is the awesome pieces, the story, the interviews and stuff. But then the other half is the art. The artwork kind of makes it. I think it makes it an even better prospect for people. And we've changed from year one. We had Eric Pavic on year one, and it's a completely different style for year two in terms of art. So if you're not that bothered about the Dreamcast stuff, just back for the amazing artwork, that's a good reason on its own. Yeah.
So people can find that Kickstarter. Just type Dreamcast into the box. It will come up as one of the first results because it's one of the newest campaigns. So please do go and back it and check it out. Yeah, awesome stuff. Yeah. Okay, now in part one of this episode, which weirdly was actually episode 79, Andrew, you were in the presenting chair and you sprang on us a random question we had no time to prepare answers to. In time-honoured fashion, I'm going to do the same. Now, in light of the recent Nintendo Giga leak, I'd like you to tell me which N64 title you would like to have seen ported to the Dreamcast. It can be any game, first party or not. This is obviously all hypothetical, and yes, I know it's a bit of a stupid question, but I'll go first and give you some time to think. So mine would be Perfect Dark on the Dreamcast, which would have better graphics and a decent frame rate. And of course, the Dreamcast never really got a really good top-tier single-player first-person shooter other than like Half-Life, which never came out officially. That was on a par with GoldenEye or Perfect Dark. So that's my choice, and I'm now going to throw it open to you lot. So breaking with tradition, I'm going to come to you first, James. N64 game on the Dreamcast, go.
First of all, I can't believe you picked Perfect Dark over GoldenEye. That's like a whole podcast in itself.
I just think it's a better game.
Travesty.
Come at me.
I'll come at you on the N64 Junkyard when we do that episode, mate. Mine is an easy choice because it's one of my guilty pleasure games that I love to play. I think I've mentioned it on the pod before, but the Cruising series from Midway, yes. Cruising USA, Cruising World. Cruising World is one of my favorite arcade racing games of all time. I played it a ridiculous amount on the N64. Not so much Cruising USA, but World it's just such a fun game to play. It's so easy to pick up and play. The different countries you drive through, all really over the top sort of design, and those kind of 90s style arcade races are just my favorite. And I don't think you can get much better than the Cruising series for just to pick up and play, kind of enjoy yourself. And we had a conversation about this, didn't we? Because there were rumors that Cruising Exotica was gonna come out on Dreamcast. Because I'm sure I remembered reading about it in like an E3 preview magazine for the official Dreamcast magazine. And Mike, ever the eye for detail, 5 minutes later comes back with a photo of that specific Dreamcast magazine where it was actually mentioned. So how far along it ever was is anyone's guess, if at all. Because I'm still pretty sure that Nintendo had some sort of trademark over the actual Cruising series, even though it was developed and published by Midway. But yeah, that would be mine.
Excellent, good choice. I'm a big fan myself of the Cruising series, as much as many people deride that series. I think it's a lot of fun. Okay, moving on. Mike, your choice, please.
Nice question to be swung on, because I'm not even sure about N64 games at all, but I think the only one I can think of which I would definitely want on Dreamcast would be Micro Machines. I know there's an N64 version of Micro Machines. Which is one of my favourite franchises ever. Love the 16-bit versions and V3 as well. So I think the Dreamcast would have had a fantastic time. We had such a great lineup of 2D games. I think a good Micro Machines title would have been a really good addition to the console.
Excellent stuff. Cool. What about you, Kev?
I'm going to go with FIFA 98 Road to the World Cup, because it'd be nice for the Dreamcast to have one more bad football game.
Yeah, that'd be cool as well. I mean, that would have obviously broken the whole EA not supporting the Dreamcast thing. Yeah.
One of the things that I see sometimes around on YouTube comments, video comments, is the reason the Dreamcast failed is because they didn't have EA. It's like, do you not remember how bad FIFA was until maybe about 2008, 2007? So it'd be nice to have ended that. To say, no, we had FIFA 98, and it was as shit on the Dreamcast as it was on the N64.
I'm disagreeing with everyone today. Road to the World Cup was all right, but World Cup 98 was amazing.
Yeah, I agree with James.
I would like to go one above that and say maybe FIFA 64 would have been a better choice for the Dreamcast.
That would be dire. That has got Dreamcast football game written all over it.
Cool. And Andrew, last but not least.
Oh, thanks for coming to me last. I had to think, because I'm not a huge N64 fan. I haven't played that many N64 games. One of the ones that I would have gone with Super Smash Brothers, just so we could get Sonic in it early, if it was on the Dreamcast, and maybe some other characters. But the Dreamcast had enough good fighting games. I think Smash would have bombed on the Dreamcast. I'd say Jet Force Gemini. I love Jet Force Gemini. One of the few N64 games that I really enjoyed. And it's on Rare Replay as well, which is fantastic. So yeah, I think that would have done really well on the Dreamcast. So I'd definitely go for Jet Force Gemini.
One thing that always sticks in my mind about N64 games is good blood and good liquid textures. So for when you shoot an enemy in things like Turok, yes, and Jet Force Gemini, you get that sort of nice gunky kind of explosion of blood, whatever you're shooting at, and that's one thing that sticks in my memory about the N64. So yeah, good choice.
Very, very unique style in the N64 games when you compare it to I suppose they all were PlayStation, Saturn, and N64 at the time. They all had very, very distinctive looking 3D, and that's because they all rendered 3D in different ways. But it was very, very distinct looking.
Yeah, okay, guys. Very good choices. And thank you for indulging me. Nice one. Okay, mixing things up from last time, we're now going to go around the table and talk about Dreamcast games, which we see as particularly heavenly, and why. The reason I say that is because last time we went hellish first and finished on a high note. Because I'm a complete depressive, I want to finish on a low note. So we're going to go. We're going to go with the good stuff first. And why we like them. So you guys don't know what each other has chosen, which will be nice because it'll be cool to see and hear your reactions. But Kev, I'm going to come to you first. What's your first choice and your heavenly game, please?
Right, I'm gonna go with an audio clue. If you can hear that, that is the sound of the Vision Dreamcast fishing rod controller. So my game of choice is the game that I'm now blanking on its official title, but it's Sega Bass Fishing. So this is my heavenly game. Just to give a throwback to the book that Andrew is apparently publishing. I discussed Sega Bass Fishing with him because it was one of the games. There was just a complete grey area almost about when it actually came out. Obviously, there was a very famous episode of the Dreamcast Junkyard where we talked about the launch games, and I included that and several others that didn't come out at launch. But for me, I remember ordering Dreamcast. I remember ordering this purely on seeing that it came with a fishing controller. I'd never seen the arcade game. I'd never heard about it. I didn't read any of the previews. I was just like, there's a game that comes with a fishing rod. I'm going to get that. I paid for it, because it was before the days of kind of pre-orders that hang in your account or wait until that it's shipped. I pre-ordered it from Special Reserves. I had to ring up, give them my details. They took the money. It would have been sometime around Christmas, probably, when I got my Dreamcast. And then the game didn't arrive for however long it was delayed. And so it got to that stage where I pretty much forgot about it. And then I remember one day, just upstairs with a few of my mates, and my mum knocked on the door and she's like, "Oh, you got a parcel here?" And opened it up and was just like, "Holy shit!
Wow!
The fishing game that we ordered 4 months ago is here." And then that was it. We used to play it all the time. Then it's one of the things that's occasionally still gets quoted amongst our kind of friend group from back then, because the announcer's got that weird kind of announcement style where if you catch a big fish, he's like, "Whoa, it's huge!" So sometimes people will record themselves saying that and fire it into some of the various groups we're in response to any number of nonsense that's come up that day. So, Sega Bass Fishing.
Do you know, that's one of the things I always remember of. Do you remember the videotape that you got with issue 0 of the official Dreamcast magazine as a tape? There's no speaking on there at all, apart from the clip of bass fishing where he just goes, "Oh, a big one," and I just always remember laughing at that.
Good choice, Kev. Any thoughts from the rest of the panel on that one?
Well, I haven't played a huge amount of it. I have it. I bought it as Kev said, I thought it was in the year one of the Dreamcast, not launch. Maybe that's not something I thought it was, but it turns out it didn't come out until like April 2000. So it was like way past launch, and so I bought the game like thinking, I haven't really played this, but I'm going to write about it for the book, so I will get it. I got a fishing controller and everything, and I don't know why I didn't get that game sooner, because it is a huge amount of fun. Like it is I mean, I saw fishing. I see fishing, and I think of like going on weird holidays with your parents, where your dad would go down to you stay in a caravan, your dad would go down to a lake and do some fishing, and you'd put the maggots in his mouth to keep them warm, and it was the grossest thing I'd ever seen. And I'm like, I don't want to go fishing. So I saw a game about fishing, and I'm like,
your holidays were weird.
Yeah, they were. Yeah.
Gotta be honest, with my dad, it was basically him stood on the bank throwing like bricks into the canal. So a bit different.
Well, so northern, Tom.
Was he trying to catch this way, or was it just like throwing bricks in?
It's just a hobby, I think.
Right, okay, fair enough. But yeah, so like Sega Bass Fishing, when I saw it at the time, just didn't interest me, because fishing had no interest in me whatsoever. And then playing it, years and years later, I was like, actually, it's not really about fishing as a sport. It's about the fun of using the controller to reel them in. It's a proper arcade game. It's not trying to be like a facsimile of the fishing experience. It's just trying to be fun, and yeah, it's really great. Even now, it's such a great game, and I don't think anybody's really come close to like capturing the same experience. Like, isn't there like a fishing controller for the Switch now, and with a fishing game, which is meant to be terrible?
Is it called Repel Pro Fishing or something? Yeah.
Possibly.
I don't know if anyone else here ever goes on Hot UK Deals. I kind of live on there, sadly.
Yeah.
That game always comes up really cheap on there, and someone will always say, "Is this anything like the fishing game from the Dreamcast?" And that someone always responds, "No, it's shit." So I'm always tempted. To just be like, "Well, I'm just going to get it because it's a new fishing game." And it's like, but I've still got my Dreamcast set up with the fishing rod plugged into one of the ports, so I ultimately just end up not playing it.
Cool. Okay, let's move on. James, hit us with your heavenly choice.
My heavenly choice. I had to think quite long and hard about this, because I thought Spirit of Speed was too predictable, so I wasn't going to go there. And I kind of wanted to pick something that wasn't an obvious kind of like retweet if you play Crazy Taxi type scenario. So I went in the end with what I think is one of the most. I think it's one of the most underrated Dreamcast games. That I think it's criminal it never got a sequel, and I think it's one of the few Dreamcast games that you could happily remaster in today's modern era, and people would enjoy playing it. But
you're going to tell us what it is? Or are you just going to keep...
No, I'm going to guess it. But at launch, I think it was massively.
He's going to keep going.
Yeah, it was massively kind of under sort of appreciated compared to the other launch games. The game is Toy Commander.
Nice.
Nice. And I distinctly remember it getting sort of lukewarm reviews when the Dreamcast came out, because everyone was gushing over Sonic Adventure because it was Sonic in 3D, and everyone wanted to say how amazing that was. And I think Toy Commander was generally sort of picking up 6s and 7s across most magazines I remember seeing it in. And I thought it was amazing. I thought I like aesthetics like that, which are kind of set in these kind of real world scenarios, and you're playing with kind of miniature vehicles and stuff, similar to the old Micro Machines, as Mike mentioned earlier on. But I thought not only did it look amazing, I thought it was super unique for the time. It was not something that we'd seen, executed in a very comprehensive way previously.
Well, I'm going to stop you there, James, because there was a game previous to this one that did feature a very realistic looking house and a cat as well. It's called Club Drive on the Atari Jaguar. I don't know if you're familiar. I don't know if you're familiar with that game, but please continue.
I must have missed thing we'll hear today.
I must have missed that one, Tom, to be fair. But yeah, So I just thought Toy Commander was great. I mean, it had everything. It had lots of variety, you know, missions on the ground, missions in the air, missions even in like water, in the bathtub, in the sinks and stuff. And it was super varied. Like you could switch between each of these vehicles during each of the missions as you worked your way around the house, basically. And each of the levels was, you know, it was get to the kitchen, get to the lounge, get to the kids' bedroom, get here, get there. And I just thought it was just executed so well. I mean, personally, I'm not someone who likes to sit down for an hour to get through one mission. And I really like the fact that the missions here, they weren't quick, but you could sort of play through a mission in a reasonable amount of time. And there was always kind of the time trials to go back to look at your ranking and everything else. And I just think it's such an underappreciated game on the Dreamcast. It's not something that often comes up. People rarely talk about it, despite it being a launch game. And
a true exclusive as well, you know, really.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then they did the spin-off demos, of course, that were featured in the Dreamcast magazine. The Christmas one was phenomenal. I loved the Christmas one, just because, I don't know, there's something nice about seeing an actual 3D model of the console you're playing a game on show up in a game, like in Super Runabout, and in the Christmas level you get it at the end of the tree once you've recovered all the presents. And then there was a summer one as well where you're kind of at the beach with a Barbie and Ken as well. I just thought it was great, and I think it was. I would have loved to have seen a sequel on Dreamcast, especially with some online play after Toy Racer. But you know, the local multiplayer was. I had plenty of local multiplayer options with death matches and stuff like that. But like everything, it relied on you having 4 controllers and 3 friends to make the most of those sorts of features. But yeah, I would pick this game up. I mean, I played it recently actually. Whilst I was sort of prepping for today, and it's still so much fun to play. The controls are great, they're snappy, it's really, really easy to pick up and play. And as I said, I'd love a remaster of this. I think it's one of those timeless art styles that, because it's not trying to be realistic, it's got a very specific sort of style to it. I think it's pretty timeless in that regard, and I think with a little bit of polish it would make a really nice remaster or something like that.
Well, really good choice. I think we've mentioned this on the podcast before, but the fact that the way that all of the toys in the game are meant to be being controlled by the young lad who's in the intro leads me to believe that he actually did flood the house. Because in some of the later levels, the kitchen's flooded. I'd like to see in the ending sequence the young lad like getting gripped by his dad because he's flooded the house and wrecked the place, you know.
And then all his toys end up in a car boot sale in part 2.
Any thoughts on Toy Racer? Toy Commander, guys.
It's an interesting game. It's really it's a very French game. I know it is a French game, but it's really out there, and it's sort of a cross between sort of the French style and Japanese style, where it's very different. There's nothing else on the Dreamcast quite like it. I gotta say, I'm not a massive fan. I seem to hate everyone's Heaven's choices so far, but it's one of those games where I think I didn't play it until modern times. I probably only played it about 10 years ago. And the controls to me were just a bit off. Don't quite get the controls.
Oh, that's fair enough. Yeah. Okay, let's move on. Andrew, enlighten us.
I'm not going to do what James did and lead it all around the houses and down the garden path. I'm going to tell you straight up. My choice is D2, and it's a heavenly game for me because it was so fucking weird. Sorry for the swear. It's bizarre to the nth degree, and I mean I'm a huge horror game fan anyway. I've been a Resident Evil fan for ages, as everybody who's ever heard me speak before knows. And coming to the Dreamcast mainly for Resident Evil, and then discovering that there were games like D2, and it's I don't know. It's one of those rare horror games where you have an auteur behind it. You had Kenji Ino, who basically, ran the show, and it was his vision. And you don't get that much in horror games, really. It's either a group thing, or like with Silent Hill, you had Was it? It was Kojima who did the original Silent Hill, right? No, I don't think it was.
No,
Who was
I don't
it?
think so.
Akira Yamaoka, I know, is the music. So it was him and who I can't remember the name of the guy who actually did Silent Hill, but it was the two of them kind of came together and made this game. But it was Ken Gino who made D2. It was his thing. Obviously he didn't do it all on his own. He had programmers and developers and people to bounce ideas off, of course. But the fact that this one guy is responsible for this this absolutely freaky. I don't even know how to describe it. But the first time I saw it was like in the magazines at the time, and it was always touted as this game that was never coming to Europe. And people were talking about how weird it was, and the fact that they were like in America it had been censored. Knowing that there was something weird and bizarre that had been censored in America made me kind of want to see it more. So I was like, I need to play this game at some point just to see why this thing was censored and why what the fuss is about. And I did, and it just starts off like the way it starts off, you kind of crashing into the tundra in Canada, and it's almost like a survival game, like you've got the modern genre of survival games where you have to go out and kill stuff and craft and make things and make your house. But it was like the version of that 20 years ago where you had it felt almost like a hodgepodge of different genres mixed together in order to, and it felt like it was a hodgepodge of different genres mixed together. This was the start of things like the survival genre, where you kind of went out exploring the area that you found yourself in. You had to hunt, which took you into a third person view to kind of hunt for deer or whatever, so you could cook and eat that to keep your strength up. You also had to fight weird monsters that seemed to have appeared in this place, and then you went and explored houses and kind of continued the story. And it was it's a difficult game to describe to people because it mashes up so many genres, and also because the story is so difficult to it's difficult to put into words sometimes. It's kind of a mute protagonist who has a plane crash, and she has a vision on the plane before it crashes, and she manages to survive and is one of the only people who does, and all the other people who are on the plane have turned into to mutants, to kind of aliens even, and then she has to go and find out what happened and figure out a way to get out of where she is.
I think the history of the game is equally as interesting as the actual game itself when it came to Dreamcast, because obviously this game originally was planned for the 3DO M2. And I can remember that's when I first was aware of it, seeing these screenshots in magazines and thinking, wow, this M2 thing's going to be amazing. And then when that kind of went down the toilet, for it to re-emerge as a Dreamcast game, that kind of made me even more intrigued. But the fact that it never got a PAL release, kind of, I think a lot of people haven't played it for that reason. And it is very much a hidden gem. The lore of this game and the way that it came to Dreamcast and all the random demo discs and all the different versions that are available is what makes it, for me, very kind of interesting and intriguing. All the little Easter eggs that hark back to the original 3DO version that you can actually find if you've got certain saves on a memory card. And not just that, but the real-time engine-driven cutscenes were one of the first things that drew me to the Dreamcast. I was like, wow, this is what games look like now. We don't have to have an FMV sequence to convey characters speaking to each other. We've got actual 3D real-time graphics that look this good. Obviously now they don't look very good, but then they were mind-blowing.
My experience is the same as yours, Tom. It was I remember seeing screenshots of this game in like CVG and stuff. One of the first sort of Dreamcast screenshots, seeing that, I'm thinking like that looked really, really good. And then I just kind of completely passed over my radar then, because it never came out in the West, obviously. But it's one of those that's on my list. I still haven't played it, but it's on it's high up on my list to make amends at some point in the near future and have a go. Because even looking at screenshots now, it looks really good. And much like Andrew, the survival horror and horror games in general are big on my agenda.
It's an experience you have to have. I think if you like horror games, it's one that you kind of have to experience it in order to really understand why people love it so much. It's you see some games like you see like Power Stone or Sonic Adventure 2 or whatever, and you can see in the first 5-10 minutes why people love it, because it's colourful, it's fast, it's exciting. You look at D2 and it's intriguing because sure, it's got good graphics for the time, and it's set in a place that you don't really, at the time you hadn't really seen many games set in that kind of location with it being so bizarre. But like you say, passes a lot of people by, mostly because it didn't come out here, but also just because it didn't really turn up on most people's radar. But if you give it a chance, if you kind of stick with it for the first half an hour to an hour, you'll want to see the whole thing through, because it is such an experience. The acting is terrible in a B-movie way, but also really you want to continue the story because you kind of almost become weirdly attached to the characters and want to see what happens next. Yeah, it's an experience, and I think that any horror lover, any Dreamcast owner and horror lover should experience that game for sure.
Yeah, it occupies that space for me in my head as the game Illbleed, that kind of weird, almost kind of just left field bizarre horror game. And a fact as well, I'm always telling people this fact, stood at a bus stop or in the shop. The only other game that Warp released on the Dreamcast.
If this is a Jaguar game, I swear to God.
The only other game that Warp produced was Club Drive. No, the only other game was Real Sounds Winds of Regret, which was a game for people who were visually impaired on the Dreamcast. So there you go. Anyway, enough of my factoids. Let's move on. Mike, tell us about your heavenly game, please. Your heavenly game.
My heavenly game. I've just recovered from your insertion of Club Drive into the podcast.
Twice, mate. There's more to come.
I mean, that's more talk about Club Drive on a podcast than any other podcast in history, I think. And rightfully so. No, it's not Club Drive. So I was going to go for something a bit random and a bit sort of, out there and obscure, as is my deal usually. But actually, I went for something a bit more mainstream. I went for a sports title, and I went for Sports Jam, which is going to be an odd one for some people. I love Sports Jam. I love Sports Jam for many reasons. Myself and Kev have a long-standing appreciation for multi-sport games on any console. And Sports Jam to me is almost like the ultimate type of multi-sport event game. I've always liked things like this since the 8-bit days, really, sort of Epix games, California games, Daley Thompson's Decathlon and Super Test on Spectrum. And it really is a sort of a modern when it was released, version of that. There's 12 different events based on sports, not just athletic events. There's American football, tennis, ice hockey, football. And they're all very short arcade titles. It's very much an arcade game. I think it was an Naomi game. I'm not entirely sure, or however you pronounce it. I know I get told off for pronouncing it Naomi. Naomi. I do apologise. If Ross was here, he would chastise me.
Just think of Maoam.
It's gone on a tangent again, hasn't it? But yeah, I think it's one of those. It's really weird. It's not a great game. I'm not going to say it's a game which is technically brilliant or the most depthful game ever made. It's not. It's an arcade experience. It is 12 short events. Some of them are very short. Some of them are basically the sprinting equivalents from Olympic Games. So you've got the American football one where you have two players have to go through a tackle and then get to a line. Ice hockey is basically it's pong basically. There's a couple of other events which are quite simple. They're very, very simple, all the events, but it's the quality and the fun, I think, is the biggest thing for the game. To me, when I was playing games like Olympic Gold back when I was 10 and 11, that was the kind of game where I always wanted to have a game which had lots of different sports, really upped the ante for this kind of game. There are some weird things with the game. There's an interesting announcer in the game.
I was waiting for that. He's great. He's like Twin Peaks, isn't it?
There's a fantastic article on Junkyard. Please do go and check it out. I think written by Tom. It was written by you, wasn't it, Tom?
It was indeed, yeah.
The announcer will haunt your dreams in a way which horror games would only hope they could manage.
Well, it's quite fitting that we're doing a Heaven and Hell, because I truly believe that guy is literally the devil. because the way he descends like through the circles of hell, and his clothing gets more sinister and his face gets more sinister as you progress through the game. I honestly think that it's an allegory for the circles of hell.
Yeah.
Sports Jam.
The game is very odd because the game there's some really good graphics in the game. The high quality graphics. So I think I read the other day that it was actually had the highest character polygon count at the time for any game when it was released, which is a bit bizarre. But I read it on Sega Retro, and there are some really good quality. I mean, the golf sections are far above any golf game we got on a Dreamcast, and they are really good detail. The faces look really quite realistic, although there are a couple of slightly dodgy ones.
I don't know if this is true, Mike, but I was under the impression that engine that was used in that golf section was actually going to be the basis for Virtua Golf for the Dreamcast.
Yeah. Was it Virtua Golf or Dynamic Golf? I think it was Dynamic Golf, wasn't it?
Maybe I'm getting it wrong, but as you say,
there was
the
a golf
visuals are
game,
really impressive,
Yeah, I mean, the visuals are really good, but at the same time, the menu screens are really, really low quality, and it just seems like a real sort of they've a really cheap port. I think it's a little bit like 18-wheeler in the fact they haven't really added much to what was a pretty simple arcade game. But at the same time, that was one of the Dreamcast strengths. I think we had some fantastic Sega arcade games, and I think Sports Jam is underappreciated by a lot of people because it is a sports game. The Dreamcast sports, especially in PAL territories, we didn't really get the greatest sports lineup in the world. And I think that people, as they do with retro games, they don't really look at sports games as much as other genres. And I think Sports Jam is really, because it's so different and because it's one of these multi-sport events which hasn't really been replicated since. I'm trying to think of anything which has been sort of similar. I suppose Mario and Sonic have elements of it, but that's a whole different.
There's a couple of sort of shovelware things on like the Wii, and there's a couple coming out on the Switch as well that are kind of similar. But I don't think there's anything as high quality as this.
No, and a lot of them will be, a lot of the Wii had a lot of this kind of stuff. I mean, the Wii was just completely and utterly way too many of these kind of shovelware titles, as you said, but the quality wasn't good. And this is a Sega game. It's a good quality. I think it was done by, I want to say WoW.
I think you're right. Yeah, you are. Yeah, you're right. Because at the beginning there's that sort of golf scene where it has WoW written on the sign. Yeah. It's a good game. I think it is a good game. It's not a game which everyone's going to love. This is very similar to my pick on the Saturn podcast because I picked Winter Heat on that. I don't think people were really convinced by my arguments, but it's very similar sort of thing where it's one of those kind of old school arcade track and field type games, and just looks really good. And actually one of the better graphical outputs on the Dreamcast. Just don't look at the announcer in the eyes or summon him at night because he will haunt you. I believe he may be the devil incarnate, as Tom said. It's really odd that, again, this is another one that was an NTSC-J only release, as far as I'm aware.
American and Japanese.
Oh, was it American as well? I stand corrected. But the fact that they didn't get a PAL release is very, very odd. Kev, have you played this one?
Do you know what? I only played this for the first time last month. Famously, the other James, who's not with us today, picked this for one of his favourite sports games that we did, and I played mistakenly ESPN Extreme or whatever it's called, and I was in the middle of discussing Sega Extreme Sports. I was in the middle of discussing how much I like the BMX and the snowboarding, and Mike pointed out I'd played the wrong game, but I have now played this and I love it. It's really you've already mentioned two things. The first thing, that it's so similar to Virtual Golf, the trackball arcade game, that I only discovered when I played Netu Golf, and I was researching for that article that was even a thing. And then the other thing, as soon as I started playing this, it reminded me of Athlete Kings so much. So it's got that kind of crazy, wacky nature to it. So it is more like that than Virtual 2K Athlete or whatever it is, or Virtual Athlete or whatever the kind of successor to that is actually called. But I've been a really big fan of this.
Brilliant. Well, that's a good, nice selection of heavenly games there, fellas. Things are going to take a bit of a turn now as we delve deep underground into hell and talk about our hellish games. I'm going to go back around the table again. We're going to talk about the games that we have a particular dislike for, that maybe other people have a soft spot for. So I'm going to go back to the top of the list. I'm going to come to you, Kev. Tell us about your hellish experience on the Dreamcast.
Right. I'm just going to get the name out there straight away. And if anyone wants to object, I'm going to give you 5 seconds, but then I'm just going to talk over you. It is Rez, okay?
Oh, get it right. Block, get him off, get it right. Disconnect. No, no, please tell us why.
Hate mail, Kev.
Tell us why.
I'm going to tell you why. I've prepared a speech, okay? So make sure you sit comfortably. Rez is an overrated game that is barely a game. It's a pseudo-experienced music composer where the music is akin to my 3.5-year-old daughter hitting the hi-hat and snare drum buttons on her early learning center keyboard I wished I had never bought her. The first 10 minutes are a boring slog of ambient nonsense, and it doesn't deserve the cult status that it seems to have, especially when it's obvious that cult status is often coupled with an elitist view that people who don't like Rez simply don't get it. But do you know what, Martin? I do get it. It's a hipster doll fest. It's not interesting. It's not as good as Vib Ribbon. It's a 5 out of 10 experience. It looks like the Star Wars arcade Atari game, but without any of the fun, cool Star Wars stuff. And if you have a problem with this, Martin, you are welcome to come down to WrestleMania 37, Inglewood, California, 2021, and I will face you in the ring at Looney Tunes Space Race Best 3 out of 5.
I'm standing up applauding you. You don't know that I am. But
Wow, it's an interesting way of saying goodbye to Dreamcast Junkyard, I suppose.
I've had a good run. So.
Wow. Anybody want to say anything about that? I mean,
yeah. I think Kev's probably wrong. I want to sort of just stand here and say that we don't all hate good games. Rez is a masterpiece. It's not even my sort of game, and I can see it's a masterpiece. Kev's wrong. Simple as that.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I recently, even this last weekend, got Rez Infinite on the PS4 for the VR, and I've been playing that, and I find it absolutely mind-blowing. Just going back to the Dreamcast version again, I agree with you, Mike. I think it's a fantastic game. Yeah, it's just a lovely melding of abstract visuals and a thumping soundtrack that it's just not been bettered, I don't think, since, really. So, yeah.
It's Mizuguchi at his best, isn't it, really? I mean, he's done a huge amount of amazing games, but that was one of the better ones. But then again, the thing is, you can't begrudge somebody their opinion for not liking a game because games are subjective and not everybody's always going to like them. So I agree with Kev in terms of the fact that, it's possible to dislike a game that everybody else likes, and it shouldn't be put up on a pedestal and everybody should have to like it because it's Rez. But I do disagree that it's a bad game. I think it's a fantastic game.
I think if it was a mini game as part of an RPG about steampunk,
you're digging a hole.
If you were hacking into a computer and you had to do 40 seconds of that, it would be fine. But I
think Martin will kill you. You know that, don't you?
Yeah, I do that. I was checking his schedule. He's not due back in the country at the same time as me for a while.
I mean, so, this is my right. So when we did Play Expo Manchester a couple of years back, we had the big screen. We had a guy called Martin, not that Martin, another Martin, who is a massive fan of Rez. We had the big screen. We had the stereo setup as well. We had Rez playing. He's a master at Rez. And he was just blasting it out, and there was a big crowd around watching this like mesmerising combination of thumping soundtrack and just like mind-blowing vector graphics. It just looked just stunning. Do you know what I mean? There were people stood there who had probably never seen Rez before, didn't know what the hell it was, didn't know what a Dreamcast was, and were just like, wow, that is a spectacle. And stood there and watched him basically complete the game, me included. And it was literally like an experience because I mean, I'm rubbish at games. I've said this many times. I'd never got as far as he was going in the game. He finished it, and I was just, mate, that was absolutely stunning. The whole thing, and people were like sort of clapping when he finished it. Do you know what I mean? It was just a complete experience. Yeah. So, yeah, again, don't disagree with your opinion, Kev. Everyone's entitled to an opinion, but you're wrong. What about you, James? Any thoughts?
I was going to go with Royal Rumble, but it's still hard for me to think about the fact that I paid £45 for that game from Comet or Dixon's. So one day when I've got over the trauma, that will replace Rez, maybe. Probably not.
Any thoughts, James? Or should we just move on?
On Res?
Yeah.
I'm a bit indifferent on it, to be honest. It was never something that appealed to me back in the day. Played it and recent, like as in the last 10 years, and thought it was all right. Didn't really think it was anything to write home about, but I can see how in the right hands, like you just described, Tom, it would be, pretty mesmerizing to watch. But then there's an argument there to say if you're having more fun watching a game than playing it, then you should be watching a movie.
Tell that to all the people on Twitch. Anyway, moving on. James, speaking of people on Twitch, your choice, please.
I'm telling you now, if you thought Kez was controversial, shall I string you on now, or do you want me just to reveal the game?
Just reveal it, yeah.
That? The game is okay by. I'm not going to do that, Tom. So, if Toy Commander was one of the most underrated games on Dreamcast, then probably the most overrated game on Dreamcast by a long margin is a game that starts with S and ends in Henmu. The game that I picked for my hellish Dreamcast game.
It's getting a bit uncomfortable in here now, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm glad I went first.
Is something that I think if you claim to be a Dreamcast fan, you have to beat yourself to a pulp to like Shenmue before you can put it in your Twitter bio that you're actually a Dreamcast fan and you're allowed to be a Dreamcast fan. I think Shenmue is a technical masterpiece for the time that it was created, but once you get past the fact that it is ridiculously impressive from a technical standpoint, the fact that it was a commercial flop just emphasizes the fact that it was just not a very fun game to play. It's, as I said, I'm not going to take anything away from the game's what the game offers in the sense of the vast open world, tons of dialogue, lots to do. It's super, super impressive, but it's just boring as shit. And that's pretty much the worst thing I could ever say about a game. I can't do games where I have to sit there and I'm just bored about playing it. And I'm about to go and do a quest and, oh my God, the shop has just closed. And now I've got to wait and find something else to do until the shop is open again, until I can carry on the quest that I'm doing. Shenmue does do things right. The combat was good. It was enjoyable. It was fun to walk around and see these open spaces, these open worlds for the first half hour. But that quickly turns into a real negative of not knowing what the hell you're supposed to be doing, where the hell you're supposed to be going. Should you be going to speak to the fortune teller, or do you have to speak to every single NPC who's walking down the road? And I've got a very small threshold of play in this game, and I'm not being funny. Whoever did the localization for this game was taking the piss. I can't think of any other reason why the voice acting is so bad. It makes Resident Evil seem like Oscar-winning nomination.
Wow.
It's not that Shenmue is a bad game. It's a average time waster, and that's probably the best way to describe Shenmue. And if you don't agree with any of that, if you imagine nowadays, if you finished a AAA game with a to be continued screen and see how people would be satisfied about that for an ending, they would hate it. So Shenmue is my idea of hell. I remember lusting over it when it first came out, and as a Dreamcast fanboy in 1999, it was the game that you dangled in the faces of PlayStation fans and N64 fans because their console couldn't do that. And then I'd have to sit down and force myself to play it in the evenings. And I remember when the remake came out a couple of years ago, pre-ordered that on Xbox One. I lasted half an hour before I uninstalled it because I just couldn't play it again. Animation was terrible. I'll shut up at this point, and I'll I'll wait for Mike to piss all over my contribution again.
No, I'm not. No, not at all. Not at all. People can I've annoyed Shenmue fanboys on this podcast many a time. But all I will say is that this is a man who openly admits he likes Spirit of Speed, saying Shenmue's boring. I mean, I don't know if that's necessarily much to go on.
Who also interrupted his own game on Spirit of Speed to join us for this podcast. Just a little peek behind the curtain there.
Big fan of the game there, right? But I think James is right. I think I love Shenmue, but I can understand every single one of those points. Shenmue is a game where you have to, even if especially if you're a big fan, you have to overlook some of its very, very obvious shortcomings. There are some clearly, the game is not as great as people sometimes put it.
Yeah, I'd agree.
It's a good game. I love the game. I played 7 days. I played Shenmue in 7 days with my girlfriend at the time. And I loved it. And Shenmue was I wouldn't say life-changing moment. It's certainly not that big, but it's a game which I love. But there are so many flaws in the game. You'd have to be the biggest fanboy to not openly admit them.
I think I said in the chat that we have the other day, it's very much a relic of that era, and a relic that should be admired and appreciated. But to play it now in this day and age is something of a chore, I find. Andrew, what do you think?
Well, I mean, I should have known that you were going to pick this, James, because you were watching me play it on stream the other day and you were complaining about it the entire time. You even offered to write the retrospective on it for the book, and I had to make sure that that's definitely not happening. But yeah, I've played this for a couple of hours, literally yesterday, and you would be stupid not to say that it has flaws. Of course it has flaws. It always did. But I think I don't know if I agree that every Dreamcast fan has to be a Shenmue fan. And I don't maybe necessarily agree that every Shenmue fan then overlooks the flaws because it's Shenmue on the Dreamcast. I think it's a lot to do with the story and the emotions that brought on at the time, and it's easy to overlook some poor gameplay decisions for a story and the feeling that it gives you. It was an experience that kind of transcended the game that it was in, and I don't know. Playing it yesterday, I had a bit of a difficult time navigating because the controls were awful. I was trying to use 2 sticks, and obviously the Dreamcast didn't have 2 sticks, so it was a terrible. It's trying to run around and look at things was a pain. But also, I'm looking at it from a perspective of 20 years on, where we've had all of these advances in technology, in games, in all sorts of stuff. So we are going to look back at something like Shenmue now and go, it is a relic. Yes, it is a relic, and a lot of games from 20 years ago are still, are also relics, but they're still good games. So yeah, I agree. It has flaws, and yes, it's difficult to play now. But I still think it's great, and I still think it's a special game. I don't hold it against you that you don't like it, James, but I don't think I would ever class it as a hellish game. So I'll disagree with you on that.
That's fair enough. I mean, we are in a democracy for now. So you are entitled to your opinion.
I was just going to reiterate really what I said is that even though I don't find the gameplay particularly interesting, I'm never going to deny that it was groundbreaking from pushing boundaries and what you think of all the things that Shenmue had that now we kind of see even in games today, like QuickTime events, like this concept of real time. Events going on in games and even kind of open world in general, really. Yes, you had the 2D stuff with Grand Theft Auto, but I mean Shenmue obviously predates things like GTA 3, which is often really thought of as kind of the first go anywhere kind of game. So from a as I said, from a technical standpoint, it was incredible. I just never ever thought it had the gameplay to go with that ambition.
I mean, would things like Yakuza exist without Shenmue?
I've always seen Yakuza as effectively the spiritual successors to Shenmue, to be perfectly honest. I've always kind of seen those two as one and the same thing.
We will get complaints on Twitter.
Of course we will.
Well, that's what that's what we're all about. We're trying to get people, enraged. That's our MO, surely, with this kind of episode, especially when you see the episode artwork.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on, Andrew.
Okay. To be honest, I don't think this is a controversial opinion. I'd be surprised if anybody really likes this game here. But it's one that I'm going to beat about the bush this time. But it's going to be really easy to guess. It's one of the Japanese launch titles, which automatically narrows it down to 4. And it was one that I wanted to cover for the first book. And Virtua Fighter was another one, and Sonic Adventure was a launch title in Japan. So those two were automatically going to get covered, which left me with 2 that never came out here, which were July and Godzilla Generations. Now, July is completely impenetrable for somebody like me who doesn't speak Japanese and has no intention of ever learning or playing with the guide. So I figured, hey, one of the launch titles that I could play, that I could write about, would be Godzilla Generations. And Godzilla, great franchise. I say great. It depends if you're looking at the Japanese side or the American side of the franchise. But it's had some great movies. It's well regarded in Japan, and I figured they'd treat it with a lot of respect. Unfortunately, I was very wrong. Godzilla Generations is absolutely terrible. It's barely a game. It's almost just like, hey, do you want to stomp around and destroy a city? Go for it. Except you have to destroy everything, and we're going to make you walk around the city for ages and ages, and you have to destroy every single tree. But we're not going to, you're really tall, and we're going to make the camera angles go at really, really cinematic angles. So you will walk to the way you thought the tree was, but then the camera will move, and you can't see where the tree is anymore. And it's terrible. It's like somebody thought, console launch, Japan, Godzilla's really popular. Let's just kind of fart something out, with the American movie coming out as well. Let's just get something out there. It doesn't matter if it's good or not. And it wasn't good at all. It was absolutely shockingly bad. And I intended to play a lot of it so I could really talk about it for the book. I played it once and put it away and have never, ever got it out again because I see absolutely no point. Because the one time I played it told me all I needed to know about that game. It's one-dimensional and just poor. So poor.
I would absolutely 100% agree with everything you've just said. It's absolutely shocking. Yeah. It reminds me, I'm going to talk about the Jaguar again. It reminds me of Iron Soldier. It reminds me of Iron Soldier, where you have to walk around in this kind of weird, like, flat shaded polygon world, blowing up buildings. I don't know why, but it just reminded me of that. Yeah. Sorry, Mike.
Yeah, I agree. Slightly threw me off there with your Jaguar version again. Fucking Jaguar, every episode you have to mention Jaguar once. But yeah, it's the game is atrocious. Just really, really bad. It doesn't get everyone says Spirit of Speed's the worst game on Dreamcast. Well, apart from James, obviously. But it is Godzilla is literally one of the worst games. The sequel, actually not too bad, but the first one was just. I mean, it doesn't even look good. I mean, the one thing you'd think the Dreamcast launch title would do well is the graphics, but no, it's awful.
I feel bad for people as well because there was only 4 launch titles in Japan, and if you're a gamer and you're really excited about Dreamcast, well, there's only 4 to choose from. A lot of people probably bought all 4, because Virtua Fighter is great, Sonic Adventure is fantastic. I don't know much about July, but they're only going to keep you occupied for so long, so you probably end up buying Godzilla Generations just purely for the fact that it was one of the only games available, and. Yep. You'd buy it and then automatically put it. I can't imagine anybody played it for longer than an hour tops. Like there's no reason to keep playing it. It is dull as well. It's so dull.
Are we still talking about Shenmue? Sorry, my mic cut out.
Can we actually cut his mic out? Is that
Hot take. Another hot take for me, though. Like what you just mentioned there, Andrew. Am I the only one who used to like it when consoles launched with like 4 games, so you had to play something that you wouldn't have played normally?
No, because when N64 came out, it had like 2 games, like Mario 64 and Pilot Wings. It was like.
Yeah, but come on, if you bought Mario 64, you didn't need anything else for a good couple months anyway.
Yeah, good point, to be honest. Yeah.
Was it Did anyone just a sidebar on that topic? Did anyone have the Xbox 360 when it came out? One of the original games with that was the King Kong movie tie-in.
Yeah.
But because there was so few games out, it had value due to the fact that you could get 1,000 achievement points in about 25 minutes.
Yeah.
So it was one of the ones that I had a go of it. It was dreadful. Put it on eBay, and then when I was looking at the listings, everyone was mentioning, you can get 1,000 achievement points from this in about 27 minutes.
Buy.
Yeah, but it still has like a relative value higher than a terrible Xbox 360 game, just for people who are score chasing their like achievement point total. Godzilla obviously doesn't even have that. I didn't even know this was a game. I thought it was just a concept. So
it's not really.
No, it's not really. Isn't.
I still can't. Whenever we talk about Godzilla on the Dreamcast, my mind immediately goes to the Godzilla VMU that came out before the console did, because we've had this conversation to death on the pod, but I was the Dreamcast was the first console pre-launch I was obsessed with, and reading all the pre-stuff about it in early '98, and then you'd seen that they were selling these VMUs before the console. I just thought that was the coolest thing ever, like being able to have this like piece of a Dreamcast before the actual console came out. I thought was amazing.
It's a good marketing ploy as well, because if you'd bought that VMU, the batteries would have went dead before the console came out. So
I was going to say, James, that mirrors my experience buying Speed Devils about 3 weeks before I actually got a Dreamcast. So I spent the next 3 weeks reading the manual cover to cover several times, over and over again.
Simpler times
indeed. There was no Twitter then, or Facebook, or any other kind of thing. Anyway, good choice, Andrew. Let's move on. Mike.
Yes.
Enlighten us.
So my choice is slightly less controversial than the wrong opinion stated by two of our co-hosts. So I have picked a game which is universally regarded as one of the greatest drive-in racing games of all time. Now, I don't drive, I'll put it out there, because I know that some people would think I shouldn't have an opinion on racing games because I don't drive, but they've got to be fun. Racing games have got to be fun. This game is classed by many people as one of the greatest racing games of all time, and it's not. It's shocking. It's always been shocking. It's an original form in every console port, and on the Dreamcast, doubly so. That game is Daytona USA. It is a atrocious game. I don't like it on the arcades. I don't like it on Saturn. I don't like it on the Dreamcast. Why don't I like it for? Well, where do I start? The controls are terrible. I don't get these mid-90s racing games that decided that the best way of making a game interesting or different was to just have terrible controls. And I'm even counting this is with the steering wheel as well. I've played Daytona in the arcades. It is not fun. And with the steering wheel on Dreamcast, the Dreamcast version is legendary for its very odd controls, very poor controls. And everyone always says, usually on a Facebook comment, telling everyone who doesn't care their opinion, how to get the game's much better with the steering wheel. Brilliant. Tried it with steering wheel, still crap. It still plays terribly. The one first track is okay. You can just about play that track okay. Every other track in the game is literally like a 10-year-old game, even on time of release. The controls are terrible. The graphics are okay, I suppose. Apparently there's a subset of hardcore Daytona USA fans who don't like the Daytona game on the Dreamcast because it's not the arcade version of 2 or whatever. I don't really care. They're geeks. But it's just, the game is just terrible. Everything about the game is terrible. The music's awful. I don't like Daytona USA music. I refuse to accept anyone who says they do. The game's just terrible. And, I know the Saturn version gets a lot of criticism, or at least the original version on Saturn. And somehow the Dreamcast version escapes that. I know when I did the poll, the last poll we did, Daytona USA at one point was 7th in the rankings. It did come down, luckily, after I put in a few fake votes. But at one point it was 7th, and I genuinely didn't know what to do because I didn't know what to say. It was like, well, this is clearly not the 7th best game on Dreamcast. I don't get the game. I don't understand the game. It's a little bit, to me, like Resident Evil in terms of the fact that I've just annoyed Andrew. I think that annoys Andrew fainting. But the same as Resident Evil, I don't understand how anyone can like the game. I just don't enjoy it. It's poor, and that is the hill I will die on.
I would like to say that I kind of get some of the things that you've just said. The controls are of a particular nuisance, I would say, for the Dreamcast version. I know that people have these like theories on how to best control the game, but have you heard about the one about the analog stick? If you roll the analog stick from the top of where it kind of meets the plastic, it's easy to control. But that aside, I totally see what you're saying. I remember when I first played Daytona USA 2001, and again, the controls were just the biggest barrier for me. Apart from you, Mike, I thought the game looked absolutely amazing. Some of the tracks, is it Mermaid Lake or one of the ones where it kind of, there's this kind of massive like left-hand bank, well, if you're playing it the right way around, and then you kind of go down under a tunnel, and you can see the whole track laid out in front of you, and I was just like, this looks absolutely amazing. This is what a full-on arcade Dreamcast port looks like. If only they'd got the controls fine. You know what I mean? The controls ruin it for me. Yes, there is the argument that you're meant to go sideways around tracks, but that's not how Daytona was on the Saturn, either in the original or in CCE. I've played it in the arcades, but it's not really a game that you kind of play to get, the feel of the controls with, because obviously you just sat there with a steering wheel. Saturn games is where I kind of cut my teeth with this game, and it does mean a lot to me because I grew up with this franchise. Yes, 2001 was a bit of a disappointment. I would have liked to have seen Daytona 2 on the Dreamcast, as a lot of those other people that you mentioned earlier say. But I do agree on some of the points you've raised. I did like the fact that it had a couple of extra tracks for the Dreamcast, and also it's almost like a best of. It's almost like a compilation of Daytona for the Dreamcast, as opposed to an out-and-out sequel. But those controls are a sticking point for me. Anyone else? Kev, thoughts?
I've just looked this up. This came 27th in the sublime 2016 Dreamcast Junkyard Top Games, which is surprising because I agree with the vast majority of what you've said there. A driving game more than any needs to handle well, and it does. It handles really badly. I played this with the Strikers pad for the review that went up in recent times, and it felt a tiny bit better with that. Maybe because there's more range on the thumbstick. But for example, Hydro Thunder is 33 on that 2016 vote. Yeah. This is infinitely more fun, better racer, great sounds, similar visuals. I like Daytona, but it's hard for me to. I like the series. I don't like that game. It's hard for me to disagree with what Mike's saying there, because even being a fan of the series, I mainly like the oval tracks. I'm not that keen on the kind of the ones that aren't speedway. So
they just feel a bit. They don't feel natural. I think it's similar to my opinions on Ridge Racer too much. I know that will also get me in trouble if I say that, but I've never understood Ridge Racer and Wipeout as well to an extent. I mean, they're all games.
No,
I know.
Martin is going to hate this podcast.
Yeah, there's another Martin who'll hate his podcast as well if he listens to it. I know he likes Wipeout, but maybe it's someone who grew up primarily as a PC gamer in the late 90s. I sort of, my thing was first-person shooters rather than arcade racers, but at the same time, I love Sega Rally. It's just they don't feel. It's not about feeling realistic. It's not about that. They're not fun. I don't get any enjoyment out of Ridge Racer, Wipeout, or Daytona USA. I just don't find them interesting games. I love racing games, but you may as well
chuck Sega Rally in there as well, because the handling is very similar in this whole needs to run on olive oil on the floor for about
Sega Rally 2 or Sega Rally 1?
2. Sorry,
I hate. I think me and Tom.
Thank God for that.
Yeah, no, not for the first one. No,
he said Sega Rally 1. I think that would have actually ended the entire podcast. And I think Sega Rally 2 was terrible as well. I mean, I think possibly. I don't think I've ever played the arcade version of Sega Rally 2. I think me and Tom played Sega Rally at Play Blackpool, but I think it was the first one.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever played Sega Rally 2 in the arcades, but I've always put it down to the fact it was a poor conversion rather than the controls.
Yeah, it was a whole Windows CE thing when it that had the frame rate kind of pegged back and the visuals kind of not as good as the arcade version.
I agree with all your points, Mike. I would never. A racing game has got to be really bad for me to consider it hell. If it's got 4 wheels and it goes around a track and the controls are somewhat responsive, then I'll play it regardless. But I do agree. I remember actually getting Daytona, borrowing it off someone off a friend when it came out on the Dreamcast, and being really disappointed. Mostly because at the time I had my N64 and. It's no secret, not that this is comparing apples and oranges, but it's no secret that Mario Kart 64 is my favorite game of all time if I had to just pick one. And I think the N64 really smashed it with those arcade style races and kart style races, and there were so many different choices on the N64. And as we alluded to at the beginning of the pod, I used to play Cruising World all the time, and for me that was just such a more fun arcade racing game experience than something that you could get on Dreamcast. So I totally agree. It was something I didn't invest an awful lot of time into, and as I said, generally speaking, when I was growing up, I would say like at least 70% of games that I would play would be racing games, if not 80% of the games I play. So it was, it says a lot, I guess, that I was obsessed with Dreamcast, and their kind of flagship arcade racer, which is one of my favorite genres, didn't ever grab me and convince me to invest my own money in it.
Daytona, I think I've played once, and I wanted to like it because it looked so good. But I completely agree. The controls just kind of ruined it, and I think I bought it, and I think I very quickly traded it in. It wasn't for me.
Wow, guys, that was a very interesting topic of discussion. I'm sure people on our social media accounts will listen to this and be very vocal on our choices, or rather your choices. Leave me out of this. But yeah, very very interesting discussion. I think we should leave on a high note, though, rather than just.
If you mention Jaguar, Tom, I swear to God.
But there's a particular console. It's a 64-bit interactive multimedia system. No. What I was going to do was I was going to ask everybody who's on the podcast just to name one game that they played recently that they really like, and just say the name of the game. That's it. Nothing else. I'll go first. Carrion on the Switch. Kev.
Does it have to be a new game?
Any game that you played recently that's good.
Right. I played Carrion. That was a great game. Today I've been playing Legacy of Kain Soul Reaver. Masterpiece.
Ooh, excellent stuff. Andrew.
The Last of Us Part 2.
Ooh, good choice. Not played it, but I've seen good things. Mike.
The latest F1 2020 game.
Ooh, good.
Nice.
Very good.
And James, do not say Spirit of Speed.
Borderlands 3. I've just started playing. I know it's old, but I've just started playing.
Fantastic. See, we're back in the game now. We're all kind of positive. We've played good games.
Yeah.
Good games exist. You know?
They do.
Now, just remains for me to say thank you to our listeners for listening, putting up with us. Please, if you have smashed your iPod up by now, all refunds can be directed towards Mike. Guys, where can we all be found on social media? Andrew, where can you be found on Twitter, and where can people find the book and the Kickstarter?
So I'm on Twitter at Oddment84. You can also find me and the Dreamcast Years team at Dreamcast Years. There'll be loads of links and stuff for the Kickstarter on there. But as you said earlier, Tom, people can just type Dreamcast or Dreamcast Year 2 into Kickstarter. And also, if you're listening to this in the future, in the vast bounds of time, you probably may have missed the Kickstarter. We'll be doing a pledge manager afterwards. So if you've missed the Kickstarter, if you're kind of listening to this later in the year or beyond 2020, have a look out for the pledge manager, check out our media accounts, and you may still be able to buy a copy.
Good stuff. Mike, where can you be found?
Yeah, so I run the world's greatest Club Drive fan site on all forms of media. I am on Twitter at space_turnip.
And Kev, where can you be found?
Just in Sheffield. I have fled all forms of social media. If you see a slightly nerdy-looking near 40-year-old probably wearing some kind of Sega merchandise, just shout, Kev! And if he looks round, it was me.
Yeah, so get yourselves down to Sheffield. And James, where can you be found?
I'm on Twitter at Agile Harvey, or you can find me on Twitch at Bang Average Sim Racer.
Good stuff. You can find me on Twitter if you want. I don't really tweet very often, but it's at Tom Lee C. And you can find us all as a collective, as ever, at the DC Junkyard. You can find us on the internet at large at the dreamcastjunkyard.co.uk or on Facebook if that's your poison. Just remains for me to say thank you very much for listening. Thank you to my panel. It's been very enlightening to take a little trip inside the hellish and heavenly selections. We'll see you on the next one. Goodbye.
Please stop this disc now.